Hi there.
Yo.
How you doing?
Fine.
So I'm just opening up Facebook, Peggy, so that I can see who's joining in.
Yeah, good
It always
evening,
takes a minute for it to go.
everybody.
Good. So Sunday morning mimosas, US time, evening pre-dinner drinks, Europe time. What do you have on hand, Peggy?
I have well, actually, I have two. So because I'm playing around a little bit today.
Peggy, it's not that late.
One
You're
red
double
wine.
fisting already.
This is cranberry juice, and
So,
and this one is a test with prosecco. So I
okay, so
have to
I
see.
have to admit, I'm super boring today because I haven't done sports yet. So I just have a limeberry tonic, no gin, no vodka, none of the interesting things. And so
But
I
it looks
know
nice. Looks cool.
I'm, yeah, I have to say I'm destroying my reputation as an aspiring alcoholic this evening, but sometimes you got to do what's right.
Then next week. So welcome to our Mimosa live session here. So today we're going to talk about leadership. And if anyone has listened to our last episode, which was about leadership, we would like to continue that conversation. So we're really
Hey,
excited
what do you
about
mean if anybody has listened to it? Of course they've listened to it. Have you not been following the stats? Just a
well,
question if those people are on the call today, right? That's the bigger question.
yeah, well, we listened.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll go ahead and kick it off and give people a chance to join in. We're super excited because as we talk about leadership, one of the things that's been happening in the news today, I mean, nobody on this planet has been able to escape the news of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I have to admit that I've known who she is for a long time, but not really very much about her. And so I've been following the news and doing some additional research, watching movies, and this woman is amazing. I mean, what an inspiration in so many different ways, and what a contribution she's made through her life's work. And then, as Peggy and I, we were talking about this a few days ago, we thought, we need to have somebody who knows more about her than we do. And I thought, what better chance than to get somebody out of the legal community? And so we've got Katherine Westerman dialing in with us today. Dialing in, do you still say that? Man, I'm showing my age, huh? So we have Katherine joining us today, who's a young up-and-coming lawyer in the state of Washington. And so Katherine, do you just want to say a couple words about your background and what you're doing now?
Yeah, hi. Hi, guys. I'm Katherine Westerman. I am a public defender in Washington State. I am an attorney at the Federal Defenders of Eastern Washington and Idaho. So, and like Jamie said, I'm a little bit of a younger lawyer, so I'm still learning how to defend federal criminal cases. So that's where I'm at right now.
So, Katherine, from somebody within the legal community, why is RBG such a big deal?
There's a couple different avenues of why she's such a big deal. So, I mean, the first is just because of what she did and that she's a woman. I mean, she was one of 9 in her class at Harvard, then graduated first in her class from Columbia. She did all this while she had a baby and a husband, and she kind of is proof that as a woman and as an attorney, you can do it all and be incredible at it. There's the sky's the limit, as she showed. And then also from the legal side of it, she just did some amazing work, specifically in gender discrimination and in law against it, as a litigator and in her time on the bench. So, I mean, just an incredible leader and someone to look up to, absolutely.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that, because I've watched a couple of movies about her over the course of the past week, and one of the things that I remember her saying is how difficult, you referenced her time at Harvard as one of 9 women in a class of more than 500 Harvard men at Harvard Law School. And she said, every time you're asked a question, if you underperform, that reflects on all of women, not just on yourself. And this is something, within the business community, we talk a lot about tokenism and how stressful tokenism is. And my God, she lived that more than any of us today have, right? And she dealt with it with grace.
Absolutely.
So,
And with some feistiness.
So feistiness, let's talk about that because, the name of our podcast is Alphaweibchen, which is the German word for alpha females or alpha women. And I had a conversation with my sister last night on the phone. Was RBG an alpha woman? And my standpoint was, and I go back and forth on this. And Jill, I see that you've joined. So, jump in and comment for us. And Sibylla, Heather, I see you guys on there too. Let us know what you think.
Hi, guys.
Maybe as we go through this, what we'd like to hear from you today, people who are online with us, two things. Number one, what do you think it takes to be an inspirational leader, in the context of leadership? And number two, do you think that RBG was an alpha female or not, and why? And so talk to us about that. And one of the things is, Peggy, we've talked to a lot of people about what this word means, and kind of the typical stereotypical alpha that people have in mind is this outspoken, extroverted, kind of loud, demanding, commanding kind of person. And RBG wasn't like that. She was super strong, but she tended to be a little bit more withdrawn and a little bit more withheld and a little bit quieter until she had something to say. And then when it was something important, she went out at full force. Is that right, Katherine? Does that reflect what you guys have learned about her in law school and such?
Yeah, when she was confirmed, she was presented to Congress as someone who's cautious and someone who wasn't she was kind of a consensus pick. But I don't know if I'd consider her reserved in her writing. She wasn't reserved in her writing. She didn't pull punches in her writing. So I don't know if I'd agree that way.
Well, and that's how she got the nickname, the Notorious RBG, right? Mm-hmm. Because she had these super fiery dissents.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the opinions that she wrote were so scathing in some cases. And I love this because RBG is this teeny tiny woman, right? But just a giant in the legal community and in what she's done and her contributions. And so comparing her to the Notorious BIG, who's this giant of a person, I find it's a nice play on things, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but isn't it all like when we're talking about this, how alpha males or alpha females, that they are thought to be so loud and so noisy and actually kicking and biting and not being very nice people. But then you have these very quiet people like RBG was, but they have such a strong mindset. And I think a lot of times it's like, or how is that, Katherine, what is it for you if especially like in the legal space, when people have to fight for something, do they have to be loud, or are they more quiet?
It's a good question. And it's something that a lot of my fellow women lawyers and I talk about, is how we come off in court. And because if you're too loud, you can be seen as really aggressive and not have the words you're saying and what you're trying to get across not come across. But if you're too quiet, you might be seen as mousy and not being a strong enough advocate for your client. And so it's a really hard balance to find. I'm really fortunate because in my job, the two leaders in my office are both women, and they have very different styles in court. And what they encourage me and encourage other lawyers in my office is to find your own style. And that may be loud and that may be quiet, or it may be your own style. And that anything that's not your own style is going to come across as disingenuous. So don't try to copy somebody else. Just do what actually works for you.
Well, and I love that, because this is one of the things that we've talked about with leadership, is that one of the keys to being a strong leader is authenticity, right? Yeah. And so that maps really closely to one of these leadership characteristics. So people who have joined us, I see a number of people have jumped in on Facebook. We're really talking about leadership here, and then putting a spotlight on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's this phenomenal leader who's had huge contributions. And so we'd like to hear from you. What does it take to be an inspirational leader? What are the attributes that you would be looking for in the people that you look up to? So we'd love to get some comments online. What about you, Peggy? What do why do you think that RBG is somebody that so many people look up to?
Well, because we've been talking about this so many times now for the last few weeks, Jamie, is for me, I'm starting to rethink my personal opinion about alpha people, male or female, doesn't really matter. And I think a lot of times it's that, especially this being very smart, intelligent, sitting back and kind of overlooking everything. Because to me, this tiny little woman, she was seeing this whole picture of of all the rights, and what she was not just looking in one direction and just going for that, just really like bam, bam, bam. But she was really, to me, I never met her, of course, but to me, it sounds like she was this person who was really taking a look that everyone and everybody and everything is is like safe and in a good place, more than just looking for like what a lot of leaders do, like, you know, they just have one topic and then they go for that, but then they don't look left and right. And she was someone who was looking all over, from what I think.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that people are very drawn to her is that, I mean, she's relentless, or, you know, was. Unfortunately, we have to start talking in the past tense about her, don't we? But she had this vision of gender equality being one of the primary things that was driving her, and she took it step by step by step. And despite, you know, some things that didn't quite go her way, she realized that it was a long-term battle that she was fighting, and she really stuck to that vision and took the steps required over decades to make this vision into a reality, right? And I think that visionary aspect is something that a lot of people are drawn to.
Yeah, and
Katherine, what do you think?
Yeah, sorry.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. She was really strategic. She didn't go forward with these cases and say, okay, now go ahead and strike down all these other similar laws. Instead, she attacked them one by one, which was just very strategic. And I mean, Jamie, you talked about watching some movies this week. So I'm assuming you watched On the Basis of Sex, which talks about one of her first, I think it was her first case in front of the 10th Circuit, where, you know, she chose to have a plaintiff who was a man. And it really helped show the male judges sex discrimination from their own point of view. And that was a very strategic decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, so, you know, Peggy, is I was thinking about this morning, I kind of went back to where we started with, you know, what did we say the attributes are of alphaism that are important, and how does that map to RBG? And again, Jill, you kind of inspired me last night where you said, of course she was an alpha. And, you know, the things that I keep coming back with is highly ambitious, which she certainly was, you know, super strong, high emotional intelligence. I mean, it floors me that she could have close, you know, friendships with people like Scalia, right? I mean, somebody who's the ultra conservative, because I'm struggling with some of the conservatives in my life today, to be honest. You know, when things get heated, it is hard to display that level of grace and that level of understanding to maintain those relationships. And so she was, you know, really good at cultivating harmony and just had this exceptional confidence and just super hardworking. I mean, if you look at, and Katherine, you alluded to it at the beginning, she had a baby, was in law school, who her husband was fighting cancer. She went to his classes and hers, right? I mean, it's just, I look back and I have to say, you look at somebody like RBG, and I think most of us come away feeling very, very humble.
Agreed.
Especially if we think of the time when she did that. I mean, we're so lucky the way we can live our lives today, especially as female leaders also. So she really paved the way.
Well, and exactly. And that's what part of the reason we can live our lives the way that we do today is because of the work that she did and the contributions that she's made. Yes. Right. And so Katherine, you know, this whole Notorious RBG and the fact that just in the last decade, she's become kind of, you know, a celebrity for young people. Mm-hmm. How does that play out? I mean, how do young people suddenly start to turn an 80-year-old into a celebrity?
I think she's just so much fun. I mean, her workouts, and one of my favorite things about her is that she didn't try to be manly. She was very feminine. She wore her collars. She when she started, it was definitely a man's profession, and she just owned being a woman and being female and being beautiful and just being herself and being feminine. And I think that authenticity is, people just love that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Yeah. So people on the phone, people online, you know, what do you think the key attributes are for being a good leader? You know, we've talked about RBG and this authenticity and this strength. You know, what else? When you look in your lives today, whether they're your friends or people you work with, what do you expect from them as a leader? And Peggy, you're involved with a lot of different leaders at the moment with all of the training programs and stuff. What comes across well and what doesn't?
It's really that inspiration part as well, because especially now, of course, we're getting tired of COVID-19, but it's still around. And I think what really makes a leader is to be to inspire people to look forward and to go on, and at the same time have that empathy. And what I said before, what RPG had all this empathy about the whole thing. So you have to respect people that are scared, or you have to respect that people who are just saying, well, this is not a big issue, and you have to bring all of them together, especially now when you're leading like remotely and you cannot even see the people. And I think there you have to work on inspiration, just to take people along and to come together and follow the same route, which you don't have that really good opportunity if you don't see each other. I think inspiration is also something that's very important and very helpful.
So, Katherine, when I look in the news, there's a lot of talk about what a void RBG's death leaves. Why? Why are her shoes so hard to fill, in your opinion?
That's hard because with her death, it leaves an opening on the Supreme Court and leaves an opening for President Trump to jam through a nominee and change the leaning of the Supreme Court. And I believe, his nominee, who he's chosen, has 3 years of experience as a judge. Just for context, I think RBG was on the Court of Appeals for 13 years before she was considered. Okay. And had substantial litigation experience before that. And so it's just, I think it's hard because obviously he's going to nominate someone that has different values, but also views the law very differently. I don't know if this was a quote from her or, but from the movie On the Basis of Sex. One of the questions during the argument is that the word woman doesn't show up in the Constitution. And she said, well, neither does freedom. And so I think going back to what you guys have been talking about her looking at the big picture, that was one of the ways that her and Scalia really disagreed on how to view the Constitution and how to read the Constitution. And she looked at it more realistically, and he looked at more like, the exact words, the exact text. And there's a big divide in the legal community about the proper way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and you could say in the legal community, it's a similar divide as you have in the religious community. Is the Bible something that you interpret word for word, or do you interpret it in the context of what you think the intent was behind the words, right? And so, yeah, it's tough. It is really tough. And she seemed to be very pragmatic in her approach in saying, what's important is what they were trying to achieve, because the US is built on a vision. And how do we uphold what they were trying to achieve? Which draws people to her, right? Because everybody wants to be a part of something big and powerful like that.
Yes. Yeah.
So Jill, I see you commenting. You think that coming across that you really care about what you're doing and trying to achieve is something that makes a good leader. Absolutely. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. And, I would sum it up. Early on in my career, somebody said, whatever you're doing, do it with passion, because that encourages other people to be passionate with you about it. Showing that you care makes a difference. So yeah, very good comment there. And, RBG was great at that. Right? There was no question about the importance that she placed on the work that she was doing, not to become a celebrity. I think she quite liked it in her later years that she reached that status, but really she was all about doing what was right and making the world a better place. And there was actually, there was something, Peggy, do you remember what that was I was talking? Yeah, in the documentary that I watched about her, she made a quote that early on, she had a professor that inspired her. And she said, I got the idea that you could do something that would make your society a little better. I thought, oh my God, that's great, because that's one of our E words, right? Our experience empowerment enhance, and the idea of enhancing your life, but especially enhancing the world around you. And that's what she was about from very early on in her life up until the day that she passed away. And I think that's super cool. So
yeah. Does anyone? There is another quote. What you found, Jamie. This, and I think that's here. Well, what Katherine just said is about how you look at law and how you look at the on how a constitution is based on, and or what it is based on, and how you interpret it. And then there was one thing that you found out, what you sent me today, Jamie, was we were here not to break tradition, to ruin history, but to grow it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's I mean, it doesn't really it's not only in the US, it's like also in Germany. We don't want to ruin things, we don't want to break things as alphas or as leaders, because that doesn't really mean it's getting better. It's something to grow things and to grow opportunities and to help people grow and live, like enhance their life. And I think that's what good, well, let's not say good, but I think that's what leadership is all about. And that's just the only thing that's the opportunity for everyone to grow and to have a better life and do better things for themselves.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and not necessarily that quote, but kind of the whole, RBG changed a lot in the world based on the work that she did, focusing on the US, but the US has impacts on the wider planet that we live on, right? And then I thought about that and I was like, okay, so is that why so many people look up to her, because she changed so many things? And I decided it's not, because change in and of itself is not necessarily good. What's good is betterment, right? Or improvement. And she really looked for improvement, saying, where are things not just, and that needs to be fixed, and then attacked those things. She just didn't try to randomly change things because we got to keep moving. But she really, targeted strategically. I think, Katherine, you used the word strategic a couple of times, said this is what needs to change and this is why.
We have a question from Jillian for you, Katherine, actually.
Yeah.
You want to read it, Jamie?
Oh, yeah, sure. So assuming we end up with a much more conservative-leaning Supreme Court, how easy would it be to actually reverse previous court decisions that have been more progressive? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm worried about.
It's certainly possible. I think that's why a lot of people are very worried.
Why does that? I mean, it seems like after the Supreme Court has made some fundamental decisions that should kind of stand and rest. So why is it such a hot button that we think that suddenly we could just reverse all kinds of stuff? Is it because of the way that the law is interpreted, or you mentioned that before?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is stare decisis, which is once a precedent's been set, the court tries to continue it on. But there's people and there's judges and there's lawyers that vehemently believe that the law was wrongly decided, that a case was wrongly decided. And if you get a majority of those people on the Supreme Court, they can write an opinion saying this was wrongly decided and they can overturn precedent.
Well, essentially, that's exactly what RBG did with her first case, right?
Yeah.
It overturned a lot of precedent. So,
yes, we did.
So we run the risk that we have some, other people taking a similar approach, but potentially in a direction that some of us would deem, backwards moving rather than forwards moving. It's all a matter of perspective. So good question, Jill. That's something I've been wondering too. So any other questions for Katherine? I know that I said that we'd have you on the phone here for about 20 minutes today, and we're kind of at that point. Anything you'd like to leave the group with, Katherine?
So one of the biggest things that RBG did is she didn't just attack all of those laws through the ACLU and the women's rights division. One of the biggest things that she did for women was in 1976, in one of the cases that she argued, she got the court to change how the Supreme Court and how courts look at gender discrimination. In the United States, when a court views whether a statute is constitutional or not, based on discrimination, it applies different levels of scrutiny. And so the lowest is the easiest one to pass. It's called rational basis, and it's just whether whether the law and the discrimination is rationally related, and it's pretty easy for the government to win. And one of the things that she did very strategically is she argued that there should be a heightened level of scrutiny. So she succeeded, and that applies in racial discrimination cases, which is the highest level of scrutiny, strict level of scrutiny. But so she was very strategic. So that was one thing I wanted to mention as far as the strategic portion of her. And then just about leadership and women and mentorship, that's kind of the one thing I wanted to leave on, is that, I have two wonderful women leading my office who were inspired by RBG, and who all of us can walk into a courtroom and feel like we belong, in part because of the work that she did. And one of the most amazing things about that is now there are women that mentor younger women. And so I feel like Justice Ginsburg really did begin a process of encouraging women to be lawyers, because we can do it, and we're damn good at it. And then mentoring those below us, and teaching how to look at the big picture, how to love what we do, how to be excellent at what we do. And so just that's one of the biggest things that I see in her legacy, and in the older women in my life mentoring me.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And it reminds me, I actually took a note on an article that I read earlier today, where they wrote about RBG, and they said she's someone who's always brought people with her, given other people credit, and tried to make space for more than just one person clawing their way to the top. And I love that, because I think that's important in leadership. And I think it's especially important in this new definition of alphaism that, we're trying to promote, Peggy, that it's about strong people who are helping make other strong people, and not just one person sitting at the top and kicking everybody else away, so to speak. And so, Katherine, it's really cool that that's something you and your colleagues have picked up on, that she's, encouraged this whole, we need more of this. And I think one of the other quotes that she said is, somebody asked her, how many women is enough on the Supreme Court? And she said 9.
Because it shouldn't be that weird to us.
Exactly.
For all of these years where there were 9 men, why is it so weird that there could potentially be 9 women? It shouldn't be that weird in our brains, but it is.
Not in 2020. Yeah, this is what Katherine, what you said is like this big picture. I mean, that's the thing that I really like about it, is that we're one world, we're one huge world, and everyone has his rights or her rights is to be here and live a good life. And so I think we need a lot of leaders that do have a vision and have a big picture, and not just see very small little targets that they want, or goals that they want to achieve, but always to, and this is what I think an alpha female or an alpha male, that's what they should be, is to just have that empathy and take a look at everything, and consider different opinions, different ways of ideas, and that, to me, that's the most important thing. And I hope that we will have lots of inspirational, visionary leaders that see the big picture.
Well, and I think that's why it's such a great opportunity to really look at RBG and say, who are those great leaders that we should all aspire to be a little bit more like? Because, I'm never going to be an RBG. She was, this titan. Not everybody can do what she did, but all of us can do something aspiring to move in that direction, to make the world a better place, to work hard, to bring other people along with us, to share the rewards. And that's where it's worth taking the time to look at who are these amazing, powerful leaders, and how can we all emulate a little bit of what they did and make that a part of our lives. And so, thanks so much, Katherine, for joining us. Thank you, Jill, Paul, Harold, everybody, Kara, I see, Sibylla, Heather, and if I missed you, sorry for that. What I'll do is, after we close this Facebook Live, I'll put down in the comments the movies and a couple of the articles that I've been reading about. So if you want to know more about RBG, this is a great moment to do it. There's lots of information out there. And I have to say, I've learned a lot in the last week, and hope that next week I'll be just a little bit more like she was.
Practice all week. Katherine, thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful Sunday. I mean, you just started, right?
Yes, yeah, I'm drinking coffee. Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I love what you're doing.
Oh, thanks, Katherine. Have a great weekend. Everybody else, have a great Sunday evening or morning or wherever you're at. And we will talk to you next week.
Next week.
Bye.